This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy. I'm cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Work takes up most of your time. That's why you should use Stamps.com to save time with your mailing and shipping. Stamps.com will simplify your postage needs and add valuable time back into your workday, so you have flexibility to focus on more important things. Stamps.com can handle your mailing and shipping needs with rates up to 88% off UPS and USPS. Send invoices, checks, certified mail, packages, and anything else you need to keep your business running with Stamps.com. If you sell online, connecting with every major marketplace and shopping cart is easy. Plus, you can schedule package pickups through their dashboard and automatically see your cheapest and fastest shipping options from different carriers with Stamps.com's Rate Advisor. Add more flexibility to your workday with Stamps.com. Go to Stamps.com/program to sign up for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/program.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, a 19-year-old disappears while talking to his parents on the phone. What happened to Brandon Swanson? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and as most of you know, Alice is still recovering from having her beautiful baby. I was able to see him recently, and he is doing great. But because of that, we have a very special guest today. I am joined by none other than friend of the podcast, huge true crime fan, and noted star of the stage and screen, Alison Sweeney. Hello, how are you doing,
everyone.
Alison?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Now, you've insisted I call you Allie, so I'll call you Allie.
Yes,
from this point
please call me
forward.
Allie.
But
Unless you're mad, and then you can.
Okay, yeah. If you say something I'm completely disagreeable, like Alison.
Yes, that's how I know.
About?
That's how I measure myself. Well, I'm so thrilled to hear about Alice because, that's amazing. I'm so impressed with her and everything she does, but I'm so glad she's taking time. She must need to sleep too.
She is very impressive. We're very impressed with her. You know, she does, at this point, she has 4 children and 4 podcasts. So I'm not, and a job. She has a full-time job too.
She's doing everything.
So I don't know exactly how she does that, but somehow she pulls it off. But we have a really interesting case for you guys. But first, before we get into that, Allie, I want to thank you so much for joining the show. We've been trying to work something out for a while. I've been watching you since Days of Our Lives, back when I would watch with my mom and dad. So you have to give a shout out to my mom and dad. That's one thing.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Brett, what are your parents' names?
Mike and Sue.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Sue. I love it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for teaching Brett good TV to watch.
Exactly.
I feel they raised you well. It's a good example.
The first episode, I remember you were in, I feel like you were baking something. I mean, this had to be like 1993.
No. So my very first episode, 1993, I was breaking back into my parents' house. So my very first scene on the show, I took a bobby pin out of my hair and picked the lock of Roman and Marlena's house. And then he is, of course, a cop. And so he caught me and he pointed a gun at me. And I said, "Daddy, don't shoot." That was my very first line.
Wow. That's awesome.
Sammy Brady. Yeah.
I promise we're going to talk about the case. But what was it like playing a villain? Was that?
Oh, it was the best. Oh my gosh. Are you kidding? That was amazing. And it's funny too, because so just so you know, I was a huge fan of Days of Our Lives with you, right? Like before I got the job, I watched every day after school. I would record it on my VCR. And if my brothers changed the channel on the TV, it would record the wrong soap and I would get super pissed at them. So, I mean, I definitely had that story. And then I got the audition to play Marlena's daughter. And I was sort of like, who is that? Like, who could that character be? And then I got the job, and my first couple of weeks there, I was petrified. I would call all the actors by their character's name. And so I was like so nervous. I never told anyone I watched the show for like the longest time. And then I was like a huge, like super fan. And so, yeah, it was really cool. And then anyway, so all of that being said, I sort of knew, the fun roles are the villains. And when my character slowly took this turn to play a villain, it was just really cool. I loved it. I had so much fun with that character.
Well, you're really good at it. I remember,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if this is,
people hate me.
I don't know if it's
okay.
a good thing. Exactly. I was going to say, like, you were so easy to hate. you just like the wedding scene with Austin, like when it all comes crashing down. I mean, that episode, man.
Slapped me. Was that the one where she slapped me?
Yeah. That's the one where she slapped you.
One. Yeah. Yeah. That was good. That was good. That's such an interesting story and does pull in the true crime conversation that was during the OJ trial that aired. And so I don't know if you had this experience, but like, the whole industry changed because of OJ and how they followed that case live. Every channel all day covered that court case, like, from 8 or 9 until 6 or 7 at night. So they would air the show at 2:00 in the morning and people had to set their VCRs. And as a result, we lost a huge viewership, which was tragic and terrible. And also it was just interesting to be along, like part of that whole thing, that I'm aware of true crime in that way, how like it was really taking over the country. And that particular episode was such a big deal that they had to air it twice. Wow. Because people missed it and they were so upset that they like flooded NBC's lines, like that we didn't get to watch it that night. Something happened and there was like breaking news and it got ruined. So they ended up re-airing it a second time because it was such a big deal.
Wow. That's the ultimate
Everyone
compliment.
wanted to really see Carrie give it to Sammy. So
yeah.
it paid off.
So you transitioned to playing, I guess, the heroes in that you have the Hannah Swensen series.
It's fun because I never got to do that, right? I was always the one that was like, scheming for, a love that wasn't hers and guys who don't want to be with her and doing these terrible things. So normally most actors have the reverse where they play the ingenue, they play a hero, and then they like, when they get older, they get to play a villain. And I've had the weird reversal and it's so fun for me. So I'm never tired of it. I love this. I love working on the Hallmark movies. I love it so much. I can hardly stand it. And it's just fun and different. And then occasionally I get to go back to Days of Our Lives and play Sammy again and cry and fight and scream and hit someone and curse. And it's just the best of both worlds.
Well, in the Hannah Swensen series, recently your movies have featured a dashing, sexy, intelligent, above all humble male prosecutor.
Yeah,
I just have to wonder, what was your inspiration?
What was my inspiration? So funny. Well, I was so grateful to have such a wonderful conversation with you and darling Alice. And thank you. I can't thank you enough for the inspiration and all the help you guys gave me, because I will say my husband also fits that role of being a handsome and modest, inspiring part of the justice system. He was a police officer for many years, and
it's the humility that's the most important part.
It is that it's true. It's true. That's the part you can't get back. But anyway,
movies.
It was. I wanted to play that role, and you guys really you offered me a perfect role model. So thank you.
Well, we've really enjoyed them, and I know you've have another one coming out soon, so y'all look out for that. Probably January or February. Maybe we can watch it all together on the gallery. But okay, you've indulged me now for long enough. I know everybody could listen to Allie talk for the next hour or so, but you were a huge true crime fan as well.
Yes.
In fact, you have played a podcaster before.
Yes.
So this is like an old hat for you.
Yeah, this is a weird, real life meets. I played this on TV and now I'm doing it.
Exactly.
So
now you're doing it for real. Yeah. So we do have a really interesting case today. And this is one of those cases. This is a classic true crime case. And this is one that a lot of people have covered, a lot of really great podcasts. True Crime Garage did really good stuff on this. Tons of YouTube videos. Just a case that grabs people and fascinates them. The disappearance of Brandon Swanson. And I want to thank you so much for joining me to help talk about this case, because it's a case that it now is quite old. I mean, 2008. Yeah. It's hard to believe that was 16 years ago, but it was.
It's been a long time, and I was checking out some of the websites about it, and, it's not less hard for the family, and it's tough when you have a case that's not resolved like this.
And we've covered a lot of disappearances, and we've had the opportunity to interact with family members, and for them, it might have been 16 years ago, but it might as well have been yesterday. It's something they live with every day, and disappearances have that unique factor where there's never really any closure. I mean, a murder, as terrible as it is, and I don't want to say that there's anything good about murder, but you have a funeral, you say goodbye, you come to terms. But with a disappearance, it hangs over you, and this case has hung over the family of Brandon Swanson for a long time. So we wanted to cover this case, and I appreciate you helping me out. And we're going to dive, I'm going to say right in, even though we've been talking for 10 minutes.
Okay, let the case begin.
Yes, let the case begin. This case takes us all the way back to Tuesday, May 13th, 2008. Brandon, who was 19 at the time and from Marshall, Minnesota, he goes to a party with some friends. It's the end of sort of the school semester, and he's celebrating, and this is something he's probably done 1,000 times. It's in the nearby city of Lind. We're going to talk about how close Lind was to Marshall, but it is just down the road. Swanson, as I said, he just finished his first year at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, and he wanted to unwind. At around 10:30, he actually leaves this party. So he's there for a little while. He's having some drinks. He's hanging out with some friends, but he leaves the party to travel to another friend's house in the town of Canby. This house is a little bit down the road. And according to friends in Lind, Brandon did not appear intoxicated when he left, though, as we have talked about many times on the show, you have a bunch of people at a party, everybody's drinking. Their ability to gauge how intoxicated someone else is at a party, probably not great. So I don't know how much we can rely on.
Unless it jumps out at you, you're not keeping track of what your friends are doing, unless there's something super noticeable about their behavior that would call it to your attention. It would just be a normal night. I mean, that's the other hard thing about cases like this is for them, it was just a normal party. Nothing stood out.
And I think that's a really good point, because I think one thing we can say is he wasn't so drunk that it did stand out. I can think of being at a party when a friend hit a wall, right? Because he'd had way too much to drink. I remember that.
We have heard your crazy stories, Brett. You have some great stories.
I do. And I feel like that adds to the podcast,
It does.
But I think we can say he wasn't like that, because nobody remembers that. I think you're 100% right. But I don't think we can say that he wasn't intoxicated, that he maybe wasn't at a point where he shouldn't have been driving, for instance. But he does. He leaves the party and he goes to Canby. While he's there, we know he had at least one shot of whiskey, and he leaves around midnight for his home in Marshall. Now, this entire area is an area he is familiar with, and I will recommend that if you're listening to this podcast, when you get a chance, pull up a map. There'll be one on our website. If you're watching on YouTube, you may be seeing it right now, but look at a map, because it's important to know sort of the geography here. And I'm going to attempt to describe it to you, but this is always difficult over, radio. So Lind is about 10 minutes from Marshall. So he lives in Marshall, and Lind is about 10 minutes southwest, right? Not far at all from where he lives. So Canby is about 40 minutes from that. So he would have had to have driven 40 minutes away from Lind west and away from his home in Marshall to get to Canby. Now, coming back from Canby to Marshall, you're essentially completing the third leg of this triangle. So you've gone south from Marshall to Lind, west from Lind over to Canby, and then back east from Canby to Marshall. So you're making yourself a little triangle. And the longest leg of this triangle would be the trip from Canby to Marshall. So the trip from the last place he was, where he took the shot, back home in Marshall. This is about a 35-minute drive, but it's actually should be the easiest drive of them all because it is directly connected by Highway 68. And if Brandon had just jumped on Highway 68, which is a 2-lane highway, but a larger road, all of y'all have these highways. It's not an interstate, but it's a large highway, probably, 55 mile per hour speed limit. It is a straight shot. He could have jumped on there and gone straight back to Marshall, but he did not do that.
And they do, just to reiterate what you said, is that they really made it clear that this is all area that he's familiar with. I think we want to note 2008, I don't think people were on their phones for GPS, right? We didn't have maps quite the way we do now, that every kid who's learning to drive now just plugs in an address and never learns where they're going. They just look at a map. I think back then it was really he knew it. He knew where he was going. He had done it a bunch of times, right?
Absolutely.
So it's interesting that he doesn't jump on Highway 68. Brandon, he doesn't take that route. Instead, he heads down back roads, essentially parallel to the highway. And around 1:15 a.m. on now May 14th, Brandon got his car hung up in a ditch along a gravel road. It's important to note that it's been 2 hours after he left the party, and it should only have taken him 30 minutes to get home. So it's interesting. I mean, certainly would take longer on the back roads, right? But I think it's something that they mentioned on True Crime Garage when I was listening to them talk about it. But obviously, I think we all know that if you're concerned about being pulled over, you might choose to take the back roads instead of a main highway if you've been drinking and you just don't want to have any confrontations about that. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons that might have happened. But however it happened, he ends up the wrong way and he's decided to turn around. I mean, I think we can guess, right? And he attempted to call his friends for help when he got stuck in the ditch, but nobody answered. So now it's 1:54 a.m. and Brandon calls his parents. He calls Brian and Annette Swanson and informs them about a situation and that he needs a ride. And he also makes it clear to them that he's not injured from the accident. He says he's in a ditch between Marshall and Lind and directs his parents there. There were several calls placed between Brandon and his parents between 1:54 and 2:17 a.m. And during one call, he states very specifically that he's on the left side of the road, just off Highway 23. And his dad reports that. Unfortunately, Highway 23 is nowhere near where he was at that time.
And this is something we're going to come back to again and again. Brandon's belief about where he is versus where his car will eventually be found and what that tells us. And we're going to talk more about why he's on these back roads, but I think Allie has nailed it. He has been drinking. He is avoiding the main road because the main road is where you would expect to have police officers. You might even have some stops to check people for DUIs. Remember, this is the end of school. The police are not stupid. They know what goes on at these times. This is precisely when they would be doing something like that.
And it is clear with the multiple calls that he does want his parents' help. He is not giving them fake addresses or locations, trying to send them on a wild goose chase. I mean, he is looking for his parents to help him. So his location that he's giving them seems sincere.
And that's backed up by the fact that he didn't call him first, right? Like he really wanted a friend to come get him. And he spent quite a bit of time trying to get a friend to come help him because he doesn't want his parents to know he's been out drinking and driving. I mean, I think that's pretty clear what happened. But when, worst comes to worst, when you're at the end of your rope, he's going to call his parents. He's going to take whatever hit he has to take.
Yeah.
So his parents know they need help and they are going to come get him. And they drive to where Brandon is supposed to be. But there's no Brandon. His mom is calling him. They're trying to figure it out. And Brandon's getting frustrated. His mom comes up with the idea of, I'm going to flash my lights. Now, remember, middle of the night, middle of nowhere, essentially, in Minnesota. They are, he is taking the back roads for a reason, to avoid the main highway. There's not going to be a lot of lights. This is very flat land. You would expect if somebody's flashing their lights in this circumstance, even if they're a good ways away, even if his parents have come to the wrong place, Brandon should be able to see them and they should be able to see Brandon. So he's flashing his lights, they're flashing their lights, but none of them can see each other. Brandon, he's getting more and more frustrated to the point that he eventually even hangs up on his mother. She calls him back and he says, look, I can't see you. I can't see you flashing your lights, but I see lights off in the distance. That must be Lind that I'm seeing. So I'm going to walk towards those lights. And eventually I'll get to town. And when I do, you can meet me in the parking lot of a local bar, like the Lynn Tavern. You can meet me there and we'll get my car later. And this seems like a great idea, right? So he starts walking. He's walking through these fields. He actually thinks he's on a golf course at this time. And you got to remember, this area, in case we didn't describe it well enough, this is farmland. So you have these towns, but you have these fields, you have farmland. They are mostly fallow at this time. This is sort of in between when you would be planting, when you would be harvesting. So, you know, it's not like he's walking through. For those of us
from like the city, what does that mean, fallow? Like just like clumps of dirt?
Yeah, I mean, basically the fields are empty. So he's not walking through like 6 foot high corn or anything, right?
Yeah.
He is just seeing an empty field, to the point that even though it will turn out he is very much in a field, most likely an agricultural field, he thinks he's on a golf course. That's where he thinks he is. So he has no idea where he is, but he thinks he's walking across this golf course, and he thinks he's heading towards Lind. This whole time that he is walking towards Lind, he is on the phone with his father. He's talking to his father, Brian, and he sort of explains to him what he's doing as he's going. He's going to cut through some fields. Initially, he's walking down a road parallel to what he thinks is the golf course. And he basically says, hey, I'm going to cut through these fields because the lights, the straight line to the lights is through the field. So he's going to do that. So he's walking, you know, he's crossing gravel roads. He sees a couple fence lines. He hears running water. He is on the phone with his father, walking for about 47 minutes, which once we start trying to figure out where he went, you can imagine how this is problematic. Even on foot, you can go a long way in 47 minutes. So then the moment happens, which has made this case famous. He is walking, and all of a sudden he yells, "Oh shit," and the call is disconnected. His father said when he said this, it sounded like Brandon may have slipped and fell. At this point, his father is trying to call him back, calls him over and over again, but Brandon never picks up. Now, the phone rings each time it was called, and in fact, it would continue to ring until around the next day, when the calls would start going straight to voicemail. And sort of the thought is that is when the phone, whatever had happened to the phone, at that point, the phone dies completely. But Brandon never tries to call his parents back. He never answers the phone. And in fact, he has not had any communication with his parents since.
So now it's 6:30 in the morning, and Brandon's parents call the police to report him missing. The police told them to wait, of course, because that happens way too often in these stories.
Way too often.
Because it wasn't, but also, right, like, what if he didn't want to be found, right? The police are sort of arguing he's a young guy who went off the grid and wants to not be found by his parents. Of course, later that day, they did get the cell phone records, so they did do something. And it showed that Brandon was actually not near Lind. He was near Porter, Minnesota, and that's where he called his parents from. So Porter is right where you'd expect it to be, between Canby and Marshall along Highway 68. A search began around 12:30, like now noon, so bright daylight, right? Brandon's Chevrolet Lumina sedan was found about 1.5 miles north of Taunton. I'm going to let you, Brett, do your map thing again. Your visual map was actually your verbal map was very helpful. But yeah, okay, so Taunton, let's go back to the map and talk about it. If we were on the triangle that we were talking about, right, that third leg, the hypotenuse, right, that's where Taunton was. So not where he said he was, but where, like, would actually make sense, right?
Right. And so, as Allie's saying, once again, you have this triangle, right? And the hypotenuse, that was great. I just called it the longest one, but that works too. So we're on the hypotenuse. So just imagine you got the longest stretch between Canby and Marshall. Now, Brandon, he'd been driving for a while by the time he got hung up, and he thought he had made it much further than he had. He thinks he's all the way down near Lind. Now, remember, Lind is south of Marshall. He's trying to get to Marshall. Lind is south of Marshall. He thinks that basically he has worked his way down these back roads so far that he's now pretty close to home. He's pretty close to home, but because he knows he's going the back roads and he knows that Marshall's on the main road, he figures what he's seeing is Lind, which is south of Marshall, not Marshall. That's where he thinks he is. But he hasn't made it anywhere near as far as he thought he had. Porter isn't that far at all from Canby. If you were on the Highway 68, you would basically, Porter's the first town you run into when you're coming from Canby. It's probably 10 minutes from Canby. Taunton is just a little bit further down from Porter. So he's been driving around this whole time, and it seems like he's basically been going in circles. And Lind, as we've said several times, is south of Marshall.
Right.
It is south of Highway 68. Taunton, Porter, and where his car is, north of Highway 68.
So the amazing thing is that they did get those cell phone records, because if they had looked where he said he was, they might never have found that car. But finally, because of the cell phone records, they find the car quite quickly. The search begins at 12:30. Brandon's Chevy Lumina sedan is found about 1.5 miles north of Taunton. And this is the part that kills you. There is no physical damage to the vehicle or evidence of any sort of injury. There's no blood. He didn't hit his head, or if he did, it didn't leave any blood or evidence of that. And it didn't look like there's any damage to the car. It was off the side of the field approach. So the vehicle was hung up. This has actually happened to me. But it is that thing where now the wheel is up off the ground. So no matter what you do, you are not driving it. The car works fine, but you have got yourself in this ditch where you cannot drive it right now. I mean, you'll just have to get pulled out of it, and then the car would work fine. It's a sharp incline. Nothing major, but the car would get hung up, so the wheels are high off the ground. You can't get. That's how they reported it to CNN at the time.
And I think you mentioned True Crime Garage earlier, and one of the guys on True Crime Garage made a very simple but a very true point. If the wheels in your car that spin when you push the gas down are not on the ground, your car is not going to move. No matter how good your car is, it's not going to move. Right. And you're right. There's no damage to this car. There's no reason it couldn't go. I mean, simply when he's making this turn, and you can imagine how lost he must feel at this point, because he's been driving for so long on these back roads, expecting to reach home, and he's not there. So he's trying to turn around. I can imagine he's frustrated. You remember, he got frustrated with his mom. He probably, went a little too far one way or a little too fast the other way, and he gets hung up like this. And there's just nothing he can do to and take
also
care
in
of
the
this.
Dark, you might have tried a 3-point turn thinking okay, I'm going the wrong way or whatever. And now there's nothing you can do. I mean, that would be so frustrating. And
I remember, I'll tell a story from high school. So this is before the crazy college years. So I'm in the middle of nowhere in Alabama, and we have all these coal mines. And so we have some it's like the foothills of Appalachia. So there's some cool sort of places up in the hills or whatever. And there was this one place called Wolf Creek. And Wolf Creek was cool because it does sound cool, right? And if you got up there, you could look out and you could see the city that I'm from. It's not really much of a city, it's a town. So you're up there, you can see the town, and it's supposed to be really pretty and all this other stuff. And I wanted to go there. So one day, a friend of mine and I, we get directions, and much like this circumstance, I mean, this was well before 2008, but we didn't have any kind of satellite navigation, right? We're just going based on what we're told. So we get our directions. We're driving into Carbon Hill, Alabama, and we take all the turns we're supposed to take, and we pass the little restaurant you're supposed to pass, and it's supposed to be the turn right after that. And we get to that turn, and I stop, and we look down this road, and it's starting to get dark. And this road is this gravel. It looks like a mining road, right? And you're like,
that can't be it.
Yeah, I know. I was like, should we do this? But being stupid, we're like, it'd be fine. So we turned down this road. And this road, it's gravel, it's rough, it's getting darker and darker. The road is getting more and more narrow, and I'm getting more and more frightened. I remember the moment where I turned off the radio, which if you're ever driving down the road and you turn off the radio, that's when you know it's serious, right? Because you're going to focus. You can't even have the music on.
Right.
And my friend's and there are ditches on both sides. And my friend's should we turn around? And I said, I am not turning around. I am just going to keep going. I'm going to stay on this road until we get out of here. So we drive. It felt like we were driving forever. Never found the Wolf Creek place or whatever. We just keep driving. We go under this massive railroad bridge. I'm like, where in the world are we? And then finally, this road comes out on a main road. Now we have no idea where we are. But we're like, at least it's a main road. So we turn down the main road and stop at a gas station. And we go into the gas station and ask the guy how to get back to the town where we're from. And the guy's like, I don't know where that is. We had gotten so lost and just so completely down the road that we were in a place where the guy wasn't even familiar with it. So he had to get out a map and we had to look and figure it out. And I feel like that's where he was. I would never have thought we were that far away. I'd have just assumed we must be close, but we weren't. And I feel like when you're lost like this, with
especially
no real at night, exactly.
Yeah. I think it can be really deceptive. And I also find, especially stuff like that, when you're trying to find the place, it always seems to take a lot longer. And then when you go back home, you're like, oh yeah, now I'm out. Like it's over. For some reason, it's now that you've done it once, it's so much easier or quicker. So I can totally understand and have myself been lost and thought, boy, this is not a great situation. So but you never think like it is always a series of decisions that you make that get you into untenable positions, right? It's never like, oh, this is a decision I shouldn't make. You think you're doing the right thing every time. So he was just continually making bad turns and bad decisions that got him worse into trouble than he knew.
And I do want to say one thing about the police. This is, as you noted, just another example, and we see this so often, the worst possible advice you can give somebody when there's a missing person is wait. Now, if this were just a circumstance where they called the police and said, hey, my college-age son, I haven't heard from him in a few hours. Do you mind looking for him? Okay. Now I can understand the police saying, why don't you give us some time? Let us know if he ever calls back, and then we'll do something. But if you told them what actually happened, it is hard for me to believe that any police officer would think, he probably is just doing something that he doesn't want his parents to know about. Clearly something has gone wrong here. And one thing that happens is the parents do the right thing, which is the thing we always tell people to do. If you ever call the police and you get this answer, the right thing to do is to hang up and then call again and call another police officer. And they actually were able to get in touch with the sheriff, Lincoln County Sheriff, Jack Vizecki, and tell him this story, and he gets the police basically moving immediately. So they didn't really end up losing too much time, but nevertheless, still terrible advice by the officer. And they probably did lose a little bit of time. Now, would it have mattered? Probably not, because where they were searching.
Yeah, exactly. And it would have been hard, but you could have started at daylight. I mean, maybe, who's to say? I mean, it's terrible to guess. But it is true. And I would say, some other podcasts I listen to, they always say, if this ever happens to you, get annoying. Do not let anyone, hang up on, do not let them tell you it's all fine. If you don't think it's fine, you better say so, better ruin their evening. Sorry. But let me know where you are, don't take no for an answer in that situation for sure.
So the police do start searching, but unfortunately, this is a search that will stretch for months. And over the months following Brandon's disappearance, it is a massive search. Volunteers, emergency personnel, law enforcement. They have people on foot. They have people in boats because there are several rivers around this area.
Dogs.
They had dogs, horseback, all-terrain vehicles. They're using everything they have. They're searching Lincoln, Leon, and Yellow Medicine counties and the bodies of water surrounding them, including the Yellow Medicine River, because what is the thing that one of the theories in any of these cases is always they fell in the water. That is always going to be a theory, and that is a theory in this case. And in fact, that was the authorities' initial position, that Brandon probably fell into some water and drowned. But as you mentioned, dogs are involved in this search, and search dogs were able to follow the scent that they had been given from Brandon to one of these rivers, I believe the Yellow Medicine River, to the river's edge. But they didn't lose the scent. They actually went through the river and continued following this scent after the river. And this suggested to searchers that maybe Brandon did fall into the water, but he didn't drown. He got out and he kept walking. The problem here, you have these search dogs, you have cadaver dogs later on. The cadaver dogs start picking up the scent of human remains. And in fact, This happened several times. And it's in the area sort of north of Porter that we talked about earlier, near one of these bodies of water, Mud Creek. But no body has ever been found. And in fact, the scent is kind of all over the place. And as we're going to see later on, one of the problems with this area is it's actually really difficult for dogs because you have these scent pools. And we've seen this before. You guys may remember the Jason Landry case and how the dogs kept hitting on various places to the point they're draining bodies of water looking for him and they can't find him. And sometimes you just have these scent pools and they're telling you something is somewhere, but where that scent is actually coming from can be massive. And the problem is because of how far he walked and where he was, we're talking about 122 square mile search area. This is a massive area to search.
On the 10-year anniversary of Brandon's disappearance, Yellow Medicine County Sheriff Bill Flatted told the Marshall Independent it's a huge area. If you take that immediate area where the car was and then the time frame, because he was walking for so long with his parents on the phone, right? And young athletic kid, I mean, who knows what direction he went, how far he traveled. You know, they kept searching. Brian and Annette Swanson sponsored a bill with the House Minority Leader, Marty Scheifert. It's Brandon's Law, and it was signed by Minnesota's governor on May 7th, 2009, and it requires law enforcement to take a missing persons report without delay after notification of someone being missing under dangerous circumstances, no matter the person's age, and immediately conduct a preliminary investigation to determine if the person is missing or if the person is endangered, and promptly notify all other law enforcement agencies of the situation. So, Brett, I will ask you now, I think it's great that they made it a law. I think it's amazing when parents and family can take something like this and try to bring it into a positive. But my understanding was that it isn't actually a thing that like, oh, we can't file a missing persons report for 24 hours. That's just like, that's kind of BS that they make up, right? Like that's not actually a rule anywhere, right? They just say that to get rid of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably was a policy a long time ago, and it's one of those that sort of hung around for a while. And it is certainly the case that an adult can decide to disappear if they want to. And it is also true that police officers have limited, I mean, you know, well, living with one, limited resources and a tough job, right?
Right, for sure.
That wasn't really a requirement then. I think the hope is that you pass the law and officers will be trained on this law.
Yes, yes.
And they're going to know. I mean, if that 24-hour thing was still hanging around, it should be fleshed out by a law like this. I mean, I think...
Well, that makes the most sense. And it should be like, yeah, that is how they should be trained. And I can understand, especially when you read about these cases in smaller places like this, where, you know, one sheriff deputy has 100 miles to cover, you know, and there's only a couple of sheriffs. And that when you call 911, that goes to a main dispatch in the nearest big town. And I mean, like, there's so many other circumstances that make it difficult for them, especially in smaller towns. I completely understand and sympathize with how hard that must be. But I also imagine that like what they don't want to hear is, oh, give it 24 hours, right? Like at least say something else. Like we'll put out an APB. We'll say something, we'll do something. I think this law is exactly right? Like, you know, initiate a preliminary investigation and then proceed accordingly.
I think that's a good point. The bare minimum would be have dispatch tell people to be on the lookout. All the officers who are just out doing their job, be on the lookout for this person. Seems like they might be missing. If you see anything, call back in. The bare minimum should have been that. And I think it was definitely a mistake. I hope it didn't have a huge effect. And I will say this, Alice and I have the opportunity to speak to law enforcement all the time. And we use the cases that we cover in our trainings. And this is always a point we make to them. We use cases like this one and some of the others that we've talked about. Matrice Richardson, you know, and we always say, don't do this. You know, there is a temptation to do this. Take it seriously. Listen. I mean, listening is the most important thing. Someone calls in and says their 19-year-old son is missing. Don't stop there. Don't shut off your brain then and say, oh, 10-year-old. Yeah, sure. He's out drinking. You know, listen to the rest of what they say. Because what they had to say made it very clear. He wasn't just out drinking. He wasn't out with friends. You know, he hadn't met a girl. This was a real issue and they should have taken it seriously.
By the way, not the least of which is if nothing else were true, just the fact that his car broke down and it's cold. I mean, we talked about it at the beginning. It was like, you're like, oh, it's not that cold. It was 39 degrees. That's really cold. That would be really cold for me. I mean, like, I think if for no other reason, the fact that he acknowledged his car was broken down is enough to go try to get him, give him assistance, get him a cab, something.
Absolutely. So just briefly, I want to talk again about the timeline. Recap. There you go. We're going to recap the timeline. I'm going to keep it brief, though, because we've spent a lot of time going over this. But just to give you an idea of how much time is passing here. And remember, he's leaving this party. He's gone to several parties, but he's leaving the last party at probably, not later than midnight. He has left and he started driving. And this is a drive that if he had taken Highway 68, it's going to take him 35 minutes at the most. So the time period we're really talking about here is about 12:30, which is when we think around then, could have been a little later, he gets stuck in this ditch, to 3:10 a.m. And that's the oh shit moment, we'll call it. So let's assume, be charitable, that he got stuck in the ditch at 1. He doesn't call his parents there for a good bit of time because he's trying to find his friends. He's trying to figure, something out. He's starting to walk around. 2:17 a.m. is when he's having this call with his mom where he's becoming impatient and he's hanging up on her. She's called him back. And this is when he says, I'm going to do this walk. I'm going to walk to Lynn. So it's 2:17 in the morning at this point. This is important for a couple reasons. As we've talked about, he may have been drinking, but at this point, he hasn't been drinking for at least 2 hours. And so to the extent he is intoxicated, some of that should be working through his system. In any event, he says, meet me at the Linwood Tavern in Lynn. I'm heading towards the lights. At 2:23 a.m. is when he starts this conversation with his father, a conversation that will last for 47 minutes. This is the phone call that ends with the oh shit moment.
Well, I just have to say, right, like that was a huge game changer for me. If I was on the phone with my son, or if I had been drinking and I was trying to hide that I was still, let's say I was so drunk that I was intoxicated 2 hours later, a 47-minute phone call, there is no way you are getting away with that with your parent. There's just no way. You could hide that level of intoxication that would lead you to these mistakes for 47 minutes with your dad. Like, I just don't. That was a big change. Like if it was on and off and the service is bad and you're disconnecting and it's a couple quick calls, I could totally believe that he was drunker than the dad, because the dad has said, sorry, I don't mean to skip ahead, but the dad has said he wasn't drunk. I talked to him and he really did. He talked to him for 47 minutes. It's a long time.
I think that's absolutely right. I think it's a great point, because that is one thing some people say is, look, he was probably just really drunk and there's no telling what he did. He probably just stumbled into the lake and drowned, right? Because he was so drunk. That's why he got his car hung up. And I think that's a mistake. And I think you're 100% right. Now, look, as we've said before, family members always want to be as charitable to their family as they can be. But I think in this circumstance, if his father thought he was impaired, he would have said something. Doesn't mean he necessarily should have been driving, but I don't think he was stumbling around drunk. And you're right. I don't think he would have carried on this 47-minute phone call if he were. And I think this whole situation has probably sobered him up a good bit anyway. He's on this phone call. He's walking along this gravel road. And at some point he makes, as you said, there is a cascade of bad decisions. And this is his latest bad decision. He's going to leave the road and travel cross country because he thinks it will be quicker than following the road. As he's walking, he says that he encounters 2 fence lines, which I guess he crosses those fence lines, and he can hear water nearby. And shortly after he mentions the water, that's when he exclaims, oh shit. And his father believes he hears him slipping, and the phone goes dead. This is at 3:10 a.m. And at this point, there is no further contact made, even after repeated attempts, and no trace of Brandon has been found from that moment.
I think we have to disregard the whole, they kept trying to call him and the phone kept ringing and then went to voicemail. I don't think it's like our phones now. I think I'm pretty sure it wasn't an iPhone. It was like a Razor or one of those, 2008 phones. And I don't think it's the same technology that we are accustomed to today. I think the ringing, whether or not it rang, I don't know that represents whether or not the phone was active. You know what I mean?
No, I agree. And I think you'll hear that sometimes in coverage of this where people will attempt to apply what we've learned about phones since then to this. Well, if it was ringing, it must have still been working or whatever. And I think you're right.
Yeah.
I don't think we can say that for certain.
The other thing about that's frustrating to me is also it probably wasn't great cell reception. So we don't know for sure what that, oh shit, I mean, what if the phone broke? What if the phone got wet? What if, and he was still okay and he could have walked who knows how much longer. It doesn't necessarily say anything about how that ended.
And
those phones were really
another
delicate.
good point. Because we've been talking about how far he could have gotten in 47 minutes while he's on the phone. There is no reason to think he stopped moving at that point. I mean, I'm not going to say no reason. I mean, you could say you think this is the moment wherever whatever happened to him and he did stop moving. That's a possibility. But as possible as the phone wasn't working for whatever reason, maybe he dropped it in water. Who knows what happened? And then he keeps moving. And he may have walked for who knows how long after this, just expanding that search grid more and more.
I mentioned it already, but it's worth noting again, right? It was May, but that's still really cold. It dropped to as low as 39 degrees Fahrenheit. When he went missing in the middle of the night, it was 46. There wasn't a lot of moon, so it wasn't that bright that night. I think there was a lot of circumstances that made it really, really hard for him once. And the other thing I was going to say about the dad, if you thought, never mind what he said to the police later, if he thought his kid shouldn't be driving, he certainly shouldn't be walking. And if your kid's like, oh, I'm going to walk to the lights, and you think your kid shouldn't be, you'd be like, no, stay where you are. Don't do that. Stay in your car. Like, I feel that if he thought there was something that his kid was impaired in some way, he would have given him different advice. I think that's part of the heartbreaking thing about this story is, as a parent, I mean, it's just terrifying a story to listen to, because of course, if he had thought any of these things were happening, he would have given his kid different advice. Don't cut through the woods. What are you doing?
Right. No, absolutely. And I can't, we talk about these cases a lot and the people who are left behind. I cannot imagine what it must be like to have been his father and been on that phone call when this happened. I mean, just a terrible, tragic situation.
Yeah. Another important thing we should note, I don't know if this is just another sort of red herring in the case or if it matters. Brandon was legally blind in one eye. He wore glasses and he left his glasses in the car.
Yeah. And as not someone, I mean, I am someone who without my glasses, I do not see very well, and I can't imagine leaving my glasses in my car. But one thing I've always wondered, if you're legally blind in one eye, what was his eyesight like?
Oh, right, in the other eye?
Yeah, was it good enough that he just didn't, for whatever reason, either because he was frustrated or he was angry or maybe he had, just had too much to drink or he just didn't think about it. He could see well enough that he didn't think, oh, I need to grab my glasses. But it is interesting that his glasses were in his car because it's already really difficult to navigate this situation.
Yes. And also I wear glasses also, and I see worse at night. Like, that's when I need them the most.
Right. Exactly.
So on True Crime Garage, they also mentioned that the doors were open. Do you think that's weird?
I heard them mention that, and I've tried to nail that down, and I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if that's something we've heard reported. There are definitely reports of that, but I do think that's weird. I mean, I do think that's strange. I don't know why you would do that. I don't know why in any circumstance the door would be open. Right. Even if you imagine someone stole the car or whatever and then got it hung up again, that's the problem.
Right.
You think somebody moved the car.
Right.
Now, look, one possibility is he didn't lock the doors and maybe somebody did come along later on and see a car and just open the doors and maybe steal something. Though there's no signs that anything was stolen either. Maybe there wasn't anything of value in there.
Or maybe they just looked for information.
Right. If that's true, then yeah, I think that's weird. But I'm just not 100% sure on whether it's true or not. But it's if true is strange. Definitely a strange one. And another strange thing, we've already touched on this, is Lynn. Yeah. Why in the world would he think he was anywhere near Lynn? Now, he would have known that he'd driven from Lynn to get to Canby. He was very familiar with this area. And he would have known that it would have taken him longer to get to Lynn than Marshall. And if he was north of the road. If he's north of Highway 68, he would get to Marshall before he got to Lind. So just working his way down the top of the hypotenuse, he would have gotten to Marshall. And in order to get to Lind, he would have had to have gone south. So this would have meant that he believed that he was south of Highway 68, but he would have known if he crossed Highway 68, because Highway 68 is a very different road from everything else he's on. It is a 2-lane major thoroughfare. It's the one he's trying to avoid. So it seems like his first mistake was he thought he was south of Highway 68. Like from the very beginning, he went wrong. Like he thought he was on the south side, working his way down towards Lind. And in fact, he was on the north side.
And I guess if there's not a lot of traffic, even if it is the main thoroughfare, you could buy that, like, without the cars. Like for me, I'm from California, right? So the ocean, that mountain range, the Santa Monica Mountains are always my navigation. Like that always tells me where west is, you know? And when I'm on the East Coast, I'm always confused because it's on the wrong side. So part of me feels like if he didn't have cars on that main thoroughfare telling him which side of the road he's on, if he wasn't seeing that to give him a frame of reference, maybe it's just so dark in the middle of the night. And if there's no one there, maybe it's not lit well enough for him to know which side he's on.
Yeah. And I think that's what happened. I think he just was disoriented from the beginning, and he was actually south. He thought he was south of the road, but he was actually north of it. And I think that's when you start to see why he thought where he was. Like he had to believe that, right? He had to believe that he was south. And then he was slowly making his way down. And that might even explain why he didn't make it that far down the road, because in his mind, he might be thinking, I need to go left, instead of right, because I'm south of the road, not north of the road. And he's basically just going in a circle right in that area because he doesn't make any progress really before his car gets
for a long
up.
time. And there's something weird about that too, because again, and maybe this does speak to a little intoxication in that his commitment to like where he was and then the flashing of the lights. And he's like, there's never a point in his mind where he thinks maybe I'm not where I'm saying. I would second guess myself like, okay, maybe it's not. You would think that. I think it would be normal to second guess yourself, especially with all these other things. Like, how long have you been driving? How could that be? And then when they say they're there and they're flashing their lights and you don't see them, and then you're flashing your lights and they don't see you, I wonder, it does make you think that there must have been some alcohol involved in this story, because otherwise you would think to yourself like, okay, this doesn't add up. Let me rethink everything I thought was true,
Yeah, I think alcohol and being a 19-year-old boy, you have a lot more, you're a lot,
right.
a lot more confident in what you're doing than maybe you should be. And I feel like he was there because you're right.
Okay.
There's never any indication of, well, maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure where I am. None of that. Like he is convinced.
Right.
I am near.
Yeah. And he was mad at them. Like they're in the wrong place.
Exactly. Yeah. They're like, what are you doing? Why can't you find me? I've told you exactly where I am. So we talked about this a little bit already, but it seems pretty obvious why he did not take Highway 68. He had been drinking. And even if he hadn't been drinking much, he was below 21. And in most states, any alcohol in your system when you're under 21 is a DUI. And in fact, it has been reported that he had a DUI before, and he had just recently completed, I think, a year-long probation based on that. So it seems like he is trying to avoid on the highway, and he's sort of driving parallel. You have these roads, they form squares. These are fields. He's kind of doing a stair step thing, drive straight for a little while, then go south, straight for a little while, then go south is what he's trying to do. But as we said, unfortunately, he's completely turned around and he's north of the road. So, and
now as that you say it, the way you describe that, it sort of makes sense to me also that perhaps if you're super familiar with that territory, but mostly you were driving that highway, you would think, okay, well, I get it. It's that direction, or it's about 40 minutes that way. But you haven't done the back roads a lot, probably. Mostly you take the highway. So it would be a little bit foreign to him. Especially because I thought the golf course thing was weird since they're farms. Like, is there a golf course where he thought he was that would make sense? Okay, so he had in his mind landmarks that he thought he was near that he just wasn't.
I mean, I've explained it, but I still don't understand it because I don't really know how you mistake a field for a golf course. Like,
no,
maybe you've never played golf before because golf courses do have a pretty specific
But
way they look.
grass
But
is, yeah, grass. And either way, grass is not dirt, right? Like
right.
there's no circumstance under which you'd be confused about that.
So
Ugh, so hard.
when the incident happens, when he gets hung up, he's driving down essentially a maintenance road, and this is the ultimate rural road. It is a road between two crop fields on either side, and the purpose of the road is obviously so like the water trucks and all the other vehicles that service the fields can travel down it, but it's not really meant to be a thoroughfare. It's not the kind of place you should be driving down. At some point, he tries to turn south onto another gravel road. And it seems like what he's trying to do, as we said, is basically do maybe a 3-point turn and turn around because he realizes something's wrong. But then he goes into this ditch, and it wasn't much of a ditch. And it seems like he wasn't going very fast, but it didn't matter. His undamaged car gets hung up in such a way that the wheels are no longer making contact with the ground, and he can't go backwards, he can't go forwards, he can't go anywhere. And this is about 1:15 when this happens, and then this ordeal begins.
Right. Right. And then, I do think it says something that he tries to call his friends first, because that says to me, it's not that bad. I'm not in real trouble. I'm just stuck and I'm not hurt. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you thought it was really bad, like you said, I'm not, and I've never been a 19-year-old boy, but I feel like I would call my parents if I was in real trouble. You're like, screw it. I'm just calling my parents. But calling your friends is like, I can get away with this. And that means there's not a scratch. There's not a bruise. Maybe someone has a truck and they could pull my car out and my parents won't even know the car's messed up. It feels like it just wasn't that bad.
And he also is thinking somewhat rationally, right? Because he's thinking through this like, well, I don't want to call my parents because I could get in trouble. So I'll call my friends first. I'm going to work towards that. Okay, I can't get my friends. I do need help. I'm going to call my parents. And I think that's important because one thing you always have to think about is no matter how minor the accident, did he hit his head? And could that have caused some disorientation? Right. But much like the intoxication, it does not seem like he's disoriented. He talks to his dad for, almost an hour. No sign of that. I really do think he was in his right mind. I don't think he was that drunk, and I don't think he was injured. I think he just got into a really bad situation.
And like I said, it does seem like a series of small decisions that got him worse and worse in trouble. It isn't one big monumental mistake that you make because you're intoxicated. It's like these tiny little things that get you further and further away from safety. Okay, so what do you think? Let's talk about the theories.
Sure.
I know how this podcast goes.
Yeah. Look, I think there are several possibilities here for what could have happened, and people speculate a lot. We can go ahead. I think we can go ahead and talk just briefly about the human involvement, right? So It was a serial killer, or it was a drug dealer that he owed a debt to. Some people say that, or he was killed by a farmer, or he was killed by an illegal immigrant or a migrant worker. I think all of those are exceedingly unlikely, if for no other reason than where he was. He was in the middle of nowhere. No serial killer found him out on a maintenance road. No drug dealer tracked him down out into the fields and killed him. I don't think it's likely that there was a farmer or a migrant worker out there during a period when you don't really work in the fields. It's not really the time you'd be doing it, who was going to stumble upon him. I think when you talk about this, if you think about the things we know, it's much more likely that something more accidental happened to him. What about you? What do you think? That's right.
Yeah, I think that again, it's the 47 minutes he talked to his dad while he was walking. I think any number of those things with another human make a lot more sense to me if it happened on the road. There's another missing person case with Brandon, a different Brandon Lawson.
Brandon Lawson. Mm-hmm.
And that one, I think, leaves you a lot more like, there could be other people involved, a conflict of some kind. But this one, to me, he was talking to his dad for 45 minutes on a walk through the middle of the night. I just don't see how, the chances of him coming across someone in the middle of the field seems so unlikely. I think that then you're tired, then it's dark, and now you are worn out, and you could have fallen asleep. He could have been soaking wet. Maybe he was fine from falling in the river, but maybe he got wet. And now it's 39 degrees and you're wet, like, and you're trying to keep walking. Like that could have really, taken a toll on someone. I think all of those are more likely than a serial killer.
And I think you've put your finger on it. I mean, if you want to know my theory, look at what we know. We know he was walking through the middle of nowhere. We know he was on the phone. We know there was a moment where something happened, which resulted in the phone turning off. And it was right after he said that he heard running water. And you have the dogs going up to the water. What I think happened is when he said that, it was very dark. He might have walked right up to the edge. You know how it is on the rivers. You can have sort of bluffs is a strong word, but drop-offs, and it's uneven. Some places go out further into the river than others. I think basically he slipped down there, and I think he went into the water. And I think when he did, I think it basically knocked his phone out, or even if it could still accept calls, it didn't ring and it wouldn't answer and it wouldn't send out calls.
It wouldn't help him. Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't help him. But at this point, now he's in the middle of nowhere and he's wet and it's cold. And I think he probably did keep walking. And the most likely thing that happened was 39 degrees when you are wet is enough to die from hypothermia. And one of the things that happens when you die from hypothermia often is something called terminal burrowing, which is when you basically try and your body is so desperate to get warm that you can be found, underneath things. Like you burrow down into the ground, you cover yourself up with leaves, you're doing everything you can to warm up. And if he were to do something like that in this area, it makes it much more difficult to find him. When you combine that with these scent pools that make it harder for the dogs to track him, the fact that this is such a large area, the search director has said there are places they have not searched that they would like to search because this is also all private property. And some of the farmers are like, look, I don't want any part of this. We saw this. You mentioned Brandon Lawson. We saw exactly this same thing in the Brandon Lawson case. And finally, many years later, one of those landowners agreed to allow a search party to search his land. And that is when they found remains that almost certainly are Brandon Lawson's and solved that case because they could finally search that area. I think that's what happened. I think he is still out there. I think this was an accident, a terrible accident, a tragic accident, but an accident. And I think he's somewhere out there. Will he ever be found? That I don't know, but it would certainly be nice if they could conduct a similar kind of search that happened in the Brandon Lawson case. And that's what I would be hoping for.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that makes the most sense. I sort of wanted to believe that if he kept walking, that would warm himself up. But I think maybe it's at a certain point you become exhausted and maybe the cold sort of affects, now it is affecting you mentally, right? And you're thinking like, you're convincing yourself, oh, I could just warm up. I'll just rest for a little while. And then it gets you, right?
And I just want to note, 40%, according to the people who've worked this, 40% of that area that we talked about, those hundreds of square miles, has not been searched. So you cannot say, people often say things like, oh, there's a massive search, they would have found him. You can't say that. They absolutely could have missed him in part of that search area.
Well, especially in that kind of terrain too. I would imagine that there's a lot of, what do they call it, with animal interaction that could have made it hard to find him. I don't know how to say that gently, but that could have made it harder to find him.
Yeah. Animal predation often will scatter the remains, and it does make it more difficult. And that, look, it's now been 16 years. You would probably expect something like that to have happened.
Yeah. If not, the farming equipment, like if it was still farmland, there would definitely be, things that are tilling the earth and plant. I mean, like it's just, you might never actually get to see find him in that circumstance, right?
It is a very difficult search. You might think of it as, oh, it's just flat land, they should just be able to search it. No, for all the reasons you just mentioned, it is a very difficult search. And so it's not surprising. I mean, this is one of those cases that's so tragic because it's so senseless. I mean, it was little mistakes, these combinations of little mistakes that put him in this position and led to this tragedy. And I think the one good thing, the legislation that we talked about earlier, hopefully that will save someone's life down the road. But it is a tragedy, but it is one of those tragedies that has really intrigued people and remains quite a mystery.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for joining us. You did a great job. You should start.
Thank you.
Your own true crime podcast. Have you ever considered that?
Oh, no. I love listening to yours. I'm very happy with that. But I would love to come visit once in a while if you guys ever need a guest. I've had a great time. This has been amazing. And I've been reading some of your comments along the way. So thank you to everyone on the chat, too. You guys are great.
So I do want to ask you, we always like to lighten the mood a little bit after we talk about these tragic cases. So I'm going to ask you, it is Christmas. Those of you listening later, you'll be hearing this in January. Happy New Year to everybody. But it's almost Christmas. So I have to ask you 2 questions. Put you on the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to do this. First question, your favorite Christmas movie overall. And second question, your favorite Hallmark Christmas movie.
Oh, these are good questions. Okay, so my favorite Christmas movie of all time. Well, I don't even know. I mean, there are so many great ones, but I guess my lifelong favorite one would have to be A Christmas Story. But
solid choice.
Yes, thank you. But more recently would be Christmas Vacation, and it's more quotable if possible than A Christmas Story, which I can also quote. But Christmas Vacation is really just like piece de resistance of Christmas movies for me. So those are my real life favorites of the Christmas movies. I have been a part of this one. The one that came out this year is called This Time Each Year. And I have to say, this is my favorite Christmas movie I have produced. I'm so proud of it. It was amazing. And it was a really special thing to be a part of.
Well, there you go, guys. That's what we're watching. We watch these Christmas movies together on the gallery. And so we're going to have to check that one out next. I was telling you earlier, we were going to watch, I think that one, but we were confused. We thought it didn't come out to the 21st, but apparently it's already out. So we messed that up, guys. I'm going to have to watch it.
Oh, no.
Maybe it was just because we wanted to watch it on demand. Maybe it wasn't available on demand.
Oh, yeah, that could be it. Yes.
That could be it.
Okay, well, then that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I love the comments. The Muppet Christmas Carol is a great add-on for the family. And Gremlins, good shout out. Die Hard would have to be, I feel like we've all worked it through our feelings on whether or not Die Hard is a Christmas movie, but it's a classic.
So I do want to say,
what's your favorite Christmas movie? Wait, no, it's what you got to answer.
My favorite Christmas movie? I don't know. I change my answer every time someone asks me this question because, like you said,
it's whatever mood you're in at that time. That's fair.
I'm a big fan of this movie called Snowman's, which I've talked about a lot, which is about a snowman that comes to life. It's a romance. They totally ripped it off. Netflix totally ripped it off this year.
This cannot be a real movie. Are you serious?
Yeah. There's another one. I can't. Hot Frosty.
Oh,
Hot
the one
Frosty,
Lacey did is Hot Frosty. Yeah, for sure.
So I really like her. I know you probably know her very well. She's great. Love her. So I'm not accusing her of ripping off Snowman's, but Snowman's was the original Frosty Comes to Life love story, and it's great, and she should check it out. But the one thing I want to ask you, because I have you here as a captive audience for like another 30 seconds. I've said this to you before, and I just want to say it again. Dolly Parton's Christmas to Remember song from her album with Kenny Rogers is basically a Hallmark Christmas movie in song. They totally should make it into a movie. Dolly should be in it. It would be amazing. But
they did make a Dolly Parton movie. Was it not? It was not a Christmas movie.
No, it was a Christmas movie, but it wasn't this Christmas movie. They should base it on her own song. I just think it would be amazing.
Okay, yeah, of course they should. I can't believe this hasn't happened.
2 people at Christmas who are alone decide to go to Tahoe because they're just going to ski or whatever, and they meet each other and they fall in love, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the perfect recipe. And
I have such admiration for Dolly Parton. She is just a living legend. Like, she is just so amazing. Her whole story, I love everything about her. So I want to look into this. I love that. Okay, good. I love that. You're like also a producer. You're a developer of content for the Hallmark channel.
Yeah, it's gonna be my
your
first credit.
Yeah. I like it. I didn't know I was going to get pitched ideas.
Well, aren't you always pitched? I mean, this is what happens, right? I mean, come on.
I do. I do find that happens quite a bit. So this is great. It's not enough that I have a character after you on my series. You need more. It's never enough for you, Brett.
Never enough. I'm sorry. I'm so demanding. Well, thank you again for all your time and for joining us. Can't wait to have you on again. Looking forward to all your movies that'll be coming out soon. I'm going to forgo all the pitches for you guys to follow us and all that stuff. All that stuff. We're not going to keep her through that. But I do want you.
I was going to say, if Alice gets like trapped in a closet and I have to co-host again, but then I realized her podcasting is in the closet. So maybe that's not the best place to lock her up. Ugh.
She could just podcast the whole time.
Think of another.
Well, the next time we'll do all three of us. She can join as well. Maybe we'll just bring all the families, all the kids, everything. We'll just make it a
we'll do a whole family. Oh, everyone's so nice. You guys are so nice. Thank you. I know I was a little concerned about that concept too. You guys, you have I love all these people on the chat. They're awesome.
They're amazing. No, they're wonderful. Yeah. And they watch all the recordings with us. And if you join Patreon, you can watch them too. Okay. So
perfect.
Going to sign off, but I want you to help me because I don't have Alice here. So I'm going to need you.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much to Allie for guest hosting today. She has been amazing. Can't wait to have her back on. Can't wait to have her on with Alice. We'll be back next week with a new show. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Allie.
And this is The Prosecutors.
The Prosecutors, except I'm not a prosecutor. I just play one on TV.
And then, Alice is doing great. So,
good.
We actually have recorded a couple things we're going to do for January, but it's nice of you. I know. It's nice of you to join so we can do this.
I'm very excited.
Live. Hello, everyone in the chat.
Hi, everyone.
And Alison Sweeney. So I don't really know. I'm a little verklempt, but that's okay. All right.
I do not think that word means what you think it means.
Let's see.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, well, knock on wood. I hope that happens.
Yeah. Okay, guys, if I don't see you in the chat before Christmas, Merry Christmas, and we'll see y'all soon.
Who knows what direction he went, how far he traveled. They kept searching. Brian and Annette Swanson sponsored a bill with the House Minority Leader, Marty Seifert. What's his name? Seifert?
Sounds good to me.
Sure. All right.